Grapple Arts Radio. Hi everybody. Today I've got Burton Richardson on the line. Now, I've known of Burton for years and years because I remember reading his articles in Black Belt magazine and Inside Kung Fu and all those older magazines about Jeet Kune Do. And at the time, I was training a lot in Jeet Kune Do. I was fascinated by it. I was fascinated by all the sub-arts within that group of people, the Kali, the Junfan, the Indonesian martial arts, and wherever you looked, Burton was always in those magazines showing really cool techniques. But since that time, Burton's really evolved his game and evolved his whole philosophy towards the martial arts, and I'm super stoked to have him on the line today, where he's coming to us from Hawaii, and we're gonna pick his brain and see what he's been up to. So Burton, how you doing?
Oh, I'm well as always. I figure if I wake up breathing, it's a good day, and yes, it's another good day.
Well, that's awesome. You just got back from class, eh?
Actually, I had guys come over. We were rolling in the carport out here. Nice, beautiful day in Hawaii, and we put the mats out and have a good time. Did a nice 2-hour session, so got a lot done. And yeah, it's that wonderful post-roll kind of your whole body is buzzing, and so we had a great time.
Another day in paradise.
Exactly.
Yeah. Well, can you take us quickly through your martial arts journey from beginning to end? And maybe I'll jump in and ask questions as we go along. But can you take us from the beginning? Why did you ever start swinging sticks at people or rolling around on the ground with men wearing spandex?
Yes, tried to stay away from the spandex guys, but it did happen occasionally. So basically, I grew up in a place called Carson, California, which is a neighboring city to Compton, California. And I spent a lot of time in my childhood. I played baseball, and in my early teens, I spent a lot of time in Compton playing ball, where I was the only non-African-American guy in the entire league. And also in Carson, there's a very diverse racially. And so what happens is you get that 5% of the population that are bad. And I just saw violence growing up, and, guns being shot toward me and this whole thing. And so, basically, I think growing up in that environment, naturally, you are drawn toward, how am I going to defend myself? And I was at a local park, a park where I first saw shooting when I was about 10 years old. And not long after that, at the gymnasium, I was walking by, and I heard this sound emanating from the gym. It was like this, huh, huh, huh sound. And there I am, this little guy, and I peeked in, and there were probably 100 people in gis throwing reverse punches. They're in lines or stances, huh, huh, huh. And, for a young guy, I was just fascinated. It was just amazing. And but my dad wanted me to play baseball, and so he said, no, you're playing baseball, none of that. And so that probably helped pique my interest, the fact that I couldn't do it.
The forbidden fruit.
That's right. And then some years later, actually, interesting enough, in that exact same park, before a practice, some guys had a magazine, and there was these pictures of this Chinese guy, and he was like unbelievable physique and all. It was from a movie called Enter the Dragon. And so they were telling me about this guy, Bruce Lee, and this and that. And some years later, when I was 17, actually my very first girlfriend, our very first date, she came to, I was a nerd, all right? So she came to my house and asked me if I wanted to go to the movies. I'm like, okay. And she took me to Enter the Dragon. How's that?
Perfect.
Yes. And she was training at the college.
She's a keeper.
Yeah, for a while. But, yeah, she's great. But, yeah, she happened to be training at the Filipino Kali Academy with Dan Inasano and Richard Basillo, and she took me over there. And, I got to watch the class, and that was pretty much it. I was just hooked. And, it was you saw these guys, everybody in sweatpants and a T-shirt. It's very much like a baseball athletic environment. And they're hitting mitts, and they're kicking shields, and then they're sparring, and some guy got a bloody nose in front of me, and I thought that was just fabulous. And then a little bit later, they pulled out the weaponry, and they started moving, and it was just, I don't know, I was just hooked. That was it, all over. So it was, yeah, it just lit a fire that's still burning.
So you were then associated with Dan Inosanto for years and years.
Yes. And just so to be clear, he's coming here to visit me in a few months, doing a seminar over here for me. Every few years I have him over for a seminar, and I'm in contact with him very often. Yeah, and this Dog Brother group that I'm associated with, like this heavy...
All right. You're going to have to break that down for the listenership. What on earth are these Dog Brothers?
Yeah, what is that thing? Okay, I'll give you the brief thing. Basically, it was at the Inosanto Academy late at night in the mid-'80s. One of the guys training there named Mark Benny, actually he was a student of mine. I'd teach him Silat, like private lessons in Indonesian Silat, amongst other things, and he was one of the senior students at the academy. And one night he came up to me and said, "Hey, you like actually stick sparring," because I would actually go to tournaments and compete in stick fighting. And it would be, a lot of big headgear. You'd have all this, like a giant suit on, so you're protected, very, very thin, light sticks, big gloves, the whole thing, knee protection, the whole deal. And he said, this friend of mine, he likes stick fighting, as somebody he met recently. And he was, "Well, you want to spar with him?" Of course, yeah, sure. So this guy comes down. He's really big. His name's Eric Naus, and big, tall guy, strong. Make a long story short, he takes a big, very big, heavy rattan stick. And he goes, "Do you mind if we use these?" I'm like, "No, that's fine." So we put on a helmet. We only have helmet, hand protection, I think maybe not knee pads, just that. That's all. And I figured because we have no protection, we're going to go really, really light, especially because these sticks are so big and heavy. Because, gosh, you could kill somebody with those things. So we start, and he just tries to take my head off, swing so incredibly hard to try to take my head off. And I found out that night that although I could block his shots, I just had nothing going. Under that kind of pressure, that kind of fear of actually getting your knee blown out or arm broken or knocked out, whatever it was, I just didn't have anything actually there, even though I was an instructor and supposedly really good at this art. So that started a big evolution, and I just want to, maybe we'll talk about that a little more later, but the idea of, you go in and you try it out. Because this guy, Eric, who was just an amazing stick fighter, his question after doing Filipino martial arts for years and years and years, his question, which was brilliant, was, "Hey, what actually happens when guys really fight for real and hit as hard as they can, especially with not much protection so you're afraid of getting hit? What actually happens then?" So he went and tested it like a scientist. And whereas I had been doing, drills and drills and drills and cool techniques and pressing everybody and all that, but that was more reality. So that helped really change my focus. Now,
So it was the pressure, it was the element of pressure that was added, and the element of fear, I suppose, as well, that showed you that you needed to train a different way, that showed you needed to test it a different way?
Well, at the time, what happened after that first night, I just literally, my mind was racing the whole way, drive home, the night, it just did not compute. I had been doing Filipino martial arts for many, many years, and I had a real reputation as being this very, very good practitioner of it. And, you go from this environment where you think everything you can do. You can do this, I can do everything. And then you get to this thing where like, whoa, only thing I could do is block. And then when he tried to smash me in the knee, I was able to move my leg out of the way. And that was, fortunately, I'd done enough sparring of going just a hand in the head with just hitting at the hand or hitting at the leg. I practiced that moving that leg, so I had some good defense there. So luckily I didn't get beaten up, but I just was lost basically. I was just totally defensive and just deer in the headlights sort of feeling. So over the years, what I found out is, you just have to. The first thing is you have to be able to function under that kind of pressure. You can know techniques. I mean, it's Jiu-Jitsu, looking at Jiu-Jitsu, which I love, of course. I spent, I don't know, gosh, it's coming up on 20 years here doing Jiu-Jitsu. It's one thing to do Jiu-Jitsu. When you add striking in, especially hard striking, when guys are really trying to hit you hard and you don't have protection, it's a whole other thing, because now there's not the fear of losing or getting your guard passed or getting submitted. There's the fear of physical damage. Mm-hmm. And that's a whole nother level. So that stick fighting really helped me to, one, be calm under pressure. And I got to say, all the times I did that, I did it for many years, and I never once wanted to go do it. When it's like, oh, yeah, Eric's coming tonight, I'm like, oh, gosh. Right. But I don't know, something, luckily, happily, whatever, something inside me just compels me. I have to go try. I can't, I just had to go do it, and I'm glad I did.
Well, it's funny because one of my defining memories is watching a couple of guys who'd been doing a lot of traditional martial arts spar full contact for the first time, not with sticks, just with boxing gloves. And the traditional martial arts stance lasted for about 3 seconds until the first guy got hit in the face. And, within 5 seconds, it had degenerated to two guys standing with their hands down at their waists, throwing these gigantic right-handed haymakers over and over. Forget both hands, forget the leaping monkey fist steals the peaches or whatever it was. It was just right hand to face, straight, with a straight arm thrown like a baseball from behind the guy's body and trading back and forth. And I was sitting there. I had done a little bit of sparring, full contact sparring at the time. So, I was sitting there finding this pretty amusing. But you put anybody under enough pressure, they go back to the primal instincts. We're not that much evolved from cavemen.
It is true, but that is like Bruce Lee talked about the truth in combat. That's the truth in combat. Once you get hit really hard, okay, now we're talking about the truth in combat. And when we talk about discipline in the martial arts, sometimes people have this separation. I think you're a good example of somebody, Stephan, that doesn't do this because you have the whole picture. But, there are a lot of people that separate. It's like, oh, this is fighting and that's martial arts. And sometimes we forget that or people forget some of those attributes, those things we look for in traditional martial arts, like discipline and such, is so important to really look for that in actually our reality-based actual fighting. For example, you get hit in the face, like you're talking, everybody goes back to that big haymaker thing until they have developed the discipline to respond well, even when they're under that pressure. So to me, that's what it's all about. Our training is if we can develop ourselves so under that kind of pressure, we can be calm and we can actually implement a really well thought out directive game plan, then we take that in our everyday life and do the same thing, because it's easy to be calm every day when everything's great. When things start going wrong, that's when we have to draw from our martial arts training and all that pressure we've been under and say, no, it's best to just be calm and do the right thing here. Don't go off the handle. Don't fire the handle and go start screaming or whatever. I just think that's probably the most important thing we can learn out of real martial arts.
Well, I think that's a really good point, Burton. I do want to move on to Jiu-Jitsu and grappling and MMA. But before I do that, I want to play the devil's advocate for a second with the Dog Brothers self. sparring where you're wearing the fencing, minimal protection and heavy sticks. The argument's been made that that teaches you bad habits for when it would come to bladed weaponry, because when I've done the Dog Brothers style sparring, you're sometimes willing to take a shot or two if you know you can get a good one in, or if you can charge into the clinch. The naysayers say, well, you're just training yourself to get your arm chopped off if we had machetes or swords or bladed weaponry. So how do you square that circle, that blades versus not blades, and that you're going to develop bad pattern or bad habits
Right.
when you're going between those two weapons systems?
Exactly. So, to me, the key question is, what are we training for? What are we training for? If I'm training to go in a sword fight, which chances are I'm not going to get in a sword fight, sword against sword fight. Probably not. Then people also say, well, you're never going to get in a stick fight. But I saw a stick fight in L.A. one time, living in downtown L.A. I saw two guys with blunt implements, and they were swinging at each other, just like you're talking about that caveman sort of thing. They're both just swinging like crazy, and if either one of them knew how to actually use a stick, they would have been fine. But as far as that thing goes, I think one thing with the helmets there are certain techniques that do not work with that helmet, even if it's a light helmet. You have to hit really hard, generate lots of power to knock somebody out when that helmet's on. Whereas a quick jab without the helmet will still get the stunning effect, and then you can follow up. So anytime you add protective equipment, it changes the way you're going to actually implement it. Like in MMA with the gloves, put the gloves on. Wow, that getting to the choke is a different thing. You just guys can grab onto your glove, and it's. When I trained Chris Lieben for 3 years. I was his head coach for 3 years. He just moved to San Diego, and we worked against that all the time, getting that choke. I mean, he would reach in and grab the glove, and the referee doesn't see it, it's okay. And then we would practice trying to get techniques where we don't. So the point being, you add the equipment, it changes everything. Now, as far as blades go, you tend not to enter with the blade unless there's a very particular way. I spent quite a bit of time training with a man in the Philippines who was the greatest living grandmaster and all, but he actually did, imagine MMA. Okay, all you MMA guys out there, which I love MMA, you step into that cage, man, that takes courage, right? Because that guy is going to try to elbow you. He's going to try to punch you in the face with those wrapped hands on those little gloves. He's going to knee in the face, kick you, the whole thing. I mean, that is a tough sport. This guy I trained with, he had 2 matches which were sword fights with no armor. Actually go in a ring with a sword, fight another guy that has a sword. So you can imagine what kind of confidence this guy had.
Who was he?
His name was Antonio Illustrissimo, Tatang Illustrissimo. Just amazing dude. Obviously, he won those matches. But it was a sword fighting system. That was his system, and there are a lot of particular details that are very different than when you're going stick fighting. You try to stay long range, and just like you look at Anderson Silva, for example, in MMA, you see his ability to strike from the outside, right? I mean, it's just amazing, his ability. If you put a knife in Anderson Silva's hand, oh, God, it would just be horrible because he is so good on the outside. Well, that's how blade fighters tend to be very good on the outside. And if they have to enter, then it's a very quick entry with control of the opponent's blade so that, they're not getting it. But, so there's, to answer the question, huge difference between heavy contact stick fighting and sword fighting. There's no doubt.
Okay. Well, let's move the conversation into more familiar ground for most people, which is the grappling end of things. So you've been doing Jiu-Jitsu, I'm assuming Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, for 20 years. Who did you start with?
I started with the Machado brothers. I was actually choreographing a movie, the famous Kickboxer 4 movie, and I asked Higan Machado and John Machado to come and be in it as Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu guys. And so that's where I really got to know them and all. And then I went to take a lesson Actually, my first lesson actually was with Hickson Gracie, my very first lesson. One of my private students that I was training in kickboxing, he said, "Hey, I'm training with this guy, you should go." So I went, and it was like, wow, it was amazing. But at that time, my mind wasn't open yet to it, truthfully. And I could tell you all kinds of stuff. But the truth was, my mind wasn't open to it yet at that time. And then a little later, it was maybe 2 years later, I started with the Machados. And, yeah, again, I just went out a little bit and did a seminar in Hawaii here. I taught a seminar here in Hawaii, and a guy named Egan Inoue came to the seminar. And I got to be really good friends with him, so I'd fly over and train him in kickboxing and such, and he'd train me in Jiu-Jitsu.
Is this when he was fighting in Pride?
This was before any of that. Yeah, he had actually quit because of the Jiu-Jitsu politics.
Okay.
He had done well. He won as a blue belt, won a bunch of tournaments over here. And then there's this whole thing that happens in Jiu-Jitsu.
Wait a second. There are politics, Jiu-Jitsu politics in Hawaii as well?
I think it's the only place that has it, isn't it?
Oh, okay. Okay, glad to hear it.
I don't think it happens anyplace else. So.
Okay, cool. Okay, so there you're there with Egan.
Yeah, and so anyway, I started training with Egan and the Machados at the same time. And what I found out, it's funny, it's the same thing like the stick fighting. But the Machados, they figured, I was this guy that's already on covers of magazines and all this sort of thing. So I didn't know any better. So each time I trained with them, I took private lessons because I didn't, at the time their classes were, I was teaching classes. I took these privates, and so what they did is they showed me some techniques and this and that, and they never had me roll for, like maybe 8 months or a year or something. I'm taking these private lessons and never actually rolling. Then I go to Egan's place, and he goes, well, here, let's roll first just to see how it is. He had this horrified look on his face after I rolled for like 30 seconds. He's like horrified because it's like, oh my gosh, he doesn't know anything. And and let's just say I had no attributes for ground fighting whatsoever, just totally fish out of water. But I just, put my time in. That was my thing. I was like, you know what? I'm getting submitted every single day. I went like a year without ever submitting anybody. Like after that, like every day I'd get submitted and never even come close to getting a submission.
Wow.
And yeah. And then later I realized it's because there's a small group. There's 4 guys. They're all better than me. And as I get better, they got better.
Mm-hmm.
So it was just I just thought it was because I was just the worst grappler in history of mankind.
That's such a common experience, and it's especially, as you point out, it's especially common in small clubs. You're getting better, but everyone else is getting better too, and it's not until some new people show up and you stomp them that you realize, wait a second, I don't suck after all.
Yeah. Well, it's funny because then I'd been training with Egan for maybe a year or so, and then I think I hadn't gone to the Machados for maybe 8 months or something. And then I'm back in LA, and I went to a class, and I'm having a great time in class. And then he says, okay, now we're going to roll. I'm like, okay, here we go. I'm going to get creamed again. They put me with a white belt, and I armbarred him. That was my first armbar. My first armbar ever. Like, oh man, what happened there? Then they put me with somebody else. I armbarred him. What's going on here? Then they put me with the blue belt. I'm like, oh geez, here we go. But I passed his guard, and I didn't submit him or anything. But it's like, it was very curious. But yeah, all you guys out there that are training in jiu-jitsu, and yeah, if you have a small group of people, it's really important to train, if you can. You train with people better than you, so you work on your defense. You train with people about the same, so you work on your flow and the whole continuity of the game. You work with people that you're better than, so you can work on your offense. So you need all those 3 because, and in the end, you may train with guys much better than you, and you should get into that offensive mindset anyway. Even though you feel, you may not catch them, you get in an offensive mindset so you don't just get defensive, and you practice working that offense, and little by little everything gets tweaked, and improved, even though you're not finishing anything or even maybe even getting all the way to something, you go with somebody not that good, bang, you get right to it. That would be my advice on that.
Well, at one point you were training not only with Egan, you were also training with Shiruto Verissimo and Barrett Yoshida as well, right?
Yeah, so I training with Egan. One day Egan says, hey, there's this new guy at our school. He had left, Barrett had left the school he was training with, again, for some, they were basically, somebody trained him at this other school and trained him for a particular fight against a guy from Brazil, and the guy who was training him bet on the other guy.
Really?
So, a little conflict of interest. So anyway, Barrett, that was finally the straw that broke the camel's back. Barrett submitted that guy anyway. But so Barrett comes over, I don't know who he is, and Egan says, hey, there's this guy, I think you really like to roll with him. I'm like, oh, cool. And so he goes, yeah, he's going to be here later. So here's this little guy, just like shy as shy can be, barely speaks at all, barely speaks at all. And he's over in the corner. Egan's like, yeah, go ahead, go roll with him. So we're going with Guy. And so I started his guard, and he's very relaxed and all, and I grabbed his gi pants, and my, at that time, my number one gi pass was the standing Torianda pass, throwing the legs pass. And so I got a good grip. I got outside his feet. I was walking around his legs. And I remember I'm walking all the way up to his head, and I'm thinking, I'm going to pass his guard. And he had a purple belt on. And I was a blue belt. I'm going to pass this guy's guard. I'm going to pass his guard. I'm putting my head down. As soon as I let go, he spun and triangled me. He just had it set up the whole time. He's just waiting for me to let go, and then boom, he just spun and put on a tightest triangle. I'm like, how about that? So I ended up getting to train, again, fortunately. You know what I did? I really appreciate training with really good people. So for me personally, instead of buying, I don't know, lavish things or spending money on going out to dinner or all this, or vacations and all, I spend my extra money on private lessons. Fortunately, my wife is good with that. So, yeah, thank goodness. So I trained privately with Barrett. I was his first private student. And so you're talking about Shiruto Verissimo, and, I mean, he came and started training Egan for a while when Shiruto moved to Oahu, because BJ Penn's on the Big Island, and Shiruto moved there and was training BJ. Then he moved over here for a little while. And so I had the great fortune of every single week I would roll with Egan, not short, but stocky, very muscular, amazing technician, just like, God, his technique is so precise. I would train with Shiruto and roll with Shiruto, who's tall, lanky, got that no and yao game, even though he's tall. And then roll with Barrett every week as well, who's just, the phenom, does nothing but jiu-jitsu, amazing grappler. So that really helped improve my overall jiu-jitsu, of course. But I would just go and train and get submitted and end up getting to corner Barrett in 3 Abu Dhabis, one in Brazil, one in Long Beach, one in New Jersey. So I was able to get exposed to all these other guys and got to know, I was about 20 feet away from the mat. We were on deck when Eddie Bravo triangled Hoyler Gracie, which was kind of neat. I got to meet, there's this little guy in our, not little, but there's a very young, shy Brazilian guy in our locker room, like the waiting area, the warm-up area. We had 4 different warm-up areas. And in ours, there was this real shy Brazilian guy. I remember seeing him. It's like, wow. It turned out, this is at the Abu Dhabi that was in Brazil. Turns out he had thrown at the last minute because somebody couldn't make it, and so they just found somebody in Sao Paulo to put in.
Let me guess. Strong little short legs, black curly hair.
Yeah.
And a real affinity for the butterfly guard and the X guard.
Gosh, that is like you're reading my mind. That's amazing. Yeah. And I remember thinking, oh, this poor guy, his first fight, when I went out, I saw he's shaking hands with Henzo. His first fight, he had to go fight Henzo. I'm like, oh, poor guy, right? Then I remember looking like, oh gosh, he swept Henzo. Oh wow, he's on Henzo's back. What in the world? So yeah, and so fortunately I know we became friends, Marcelo Garcia and I. We got acquainted there and became friends at the next one, and then he came over here. So yeah, my approach to training jiu-jitsu as far as learning is I just go and train with the best people I can possibly train with wherever I can possibly do it. And what's nice is you start to see corollaries, or let's take the triangle, for example. I think it's a really good example. You learn the triangle from a particular person, like say Barrett Yoshida, who's this phenomenal triangle. Mm-hmm. You learn it from him, and I get all the details, his details, and this and that. Great. Then I'm learning the triangle from Sharuto, and Sharuto says, hey, flex your toes, pull your toes back. It makes your calf hard, and it makes everything tightens up a little more. Like, oh, wow, there's another detail. Then somebody else gives you another detail. Somebody else gives you this one detail you've never heard anyplace. And, you keep doing that, you end up with these details that all of a sudden, if you throw the triangle on somebody, they're not getting out of it. So, just like, it's the JKD concept. Let's go back to Bruce Lee for just a second. The idea is to train with whatever you can find, including different instructors, and you take the best of it. You just take the very best of it. And it's a mindset, and it's actually a way of life. It's just constantly looking to improve yourself and see what you can learn from these different great, whether it's grapplers or kickboxers or clinch guys, Greco-Roman or whoever, just constantly looking to improve.
Okay. Well, so you jumped down the jiu-jitsu rabbit hole big time, clearly. How then do you square the circle between the training jiu-jitsu for the love of training jiu-jitsu and the sort of streetwise aspects of it, using this art or using aspects of this art in the street or in a self-defense situation, and how that ties in with, the what about multiple opponents argument, or the what about weapons, or what about striking? How can one adapt one's grappling to be street-proof?
Yes, I think it's interesting that with me, I did all these martial arts, and it was all, quote, street, it's like, oh, this is all for, self-defense. It's not that sports stuff. And then when this is what I came to the realization. And let me say right here, in case anybody, my instructor, Dan Inosanto, I'm not saying he taught me wrong or anything like that, because he told me and everybody else plenty of times, you got to get your sparring in. One competition is worth 6 months of training and all that. He said this all the time, but it's one thing to hear it. It's another thing to actually grasp it and do what he said. But what I came to realize is that I was not a functional kickboxer. I was not functional in the clinch. I was not functional in weaponry. I was not functional on the ground. So, wow. So I just said, you know what? I'm not going to teach any seminars. All that stuff I was teaching for all those years and doing seminars, like 40-some seminars a year, I just told everybody I'm not doing that anymore. If you want to have me out for a seminar, I'm not showing any of that stuff anymore. I'm only going to show you the things I know for a fact works, because I or someone I know has done it under real pressure. And so I went way into the sports side because I knew it worked. Then years and years later, when I really was very comfortable in all the ranges and I was having good success with good people.
I'm sorry. Let's just jump back here a second. When you said went into the sports side, you meant, for example, kickboxing against somebody who's really trying to punch your head in as well, and grappling against somebody who's really trying to armbar you as well. Is that what you mean by sports side?
Yes. So
okay.
the aspect of actually competing, having someone really trying to do it to you, getting really good people. So it was kickboxing, MMA, Jiu-Jitsu, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and some wrestling also, and clinch and such. So after doing that for years, it came back. Okay, my students are doing well. I am very comfortable, and this and that. Like, my original thing was self-defense, and I just decided, I'm gonna go and delve into that again. So instead of starting and going, here are the techniques that we have, we can grab the throat, we can hit them in the groin, blah blah blah, all this stuff. Then I said, okay, now I know what I'm doing. Now let me look at it again. And because we all know that there are a lot of traditional martial artists that just don't know how to fight at all. And they think they do, and they'll look at the sport and say, that's no good. Look, you just hit them in the groin, blah, blah, blah. It's just not true.
I'm sure you've seen that wonderful clip of the Dim Mak Chinese Kung Fu master fighting this MMA guy. And, the guy's busy throwing his students around without touching them, and then the next thing you know, he gets demolished.
It's just the best example, and especially since that MMA guy, he was no high-level guy or anything. He was just some guy. It was a great example. So that's why I went toward the sports side. I was like, okay, I know this works. And when I wanted to go back to self-defense, I just built everything around that base first. And then I said, it's so simple. Just go, okay, we're going to do Greco-Roman MMA, not Greco-Roman for the sport of Greco-Roman, but for the MMA version. I trained with Randy Couture for years, and a little bit with Matt Lindland, and a lot with a guy named Robert Follows, who was the head coach at Team Quest. Mm-hmm. And let's take that kind of clinch, and now we're going to either try to throw knees to the groin, or I'm going to hit to the groin with my hand. Okay, well, guess what? The structure changes. But still the basic elements are there. The underhook is there, the snap downs and the sweeps and the arm drag to the back. Everything's still there, but you just make little adjustments. Then I made the adjustment of, hey, we have to deal with weapons. And this is on the ground as well, like jiu-jitsu-wise. You take the MMA with the striking and all. And for self-defense, priorities are different. Imagine if you're training jiu-jitsu for a jiu-jitsu match. Once you have somebody in your guard, you have certain priorities, where you're going to get your grip, where you're going, where you're gripping and such. If you change that to no-gi, okay, your grips are going to change. You have different priorities. You change it to MMA, it's really going to change because now you have to control posture, so you don't get smashed in the face. Then you change it to street situation. Your priority becomes stand up as quickly as you possibly can in a lot of situations. So that's why I trained with a former UFC fighter, Nate Corey. He was one of the Team Quest guys. Nate is awesome at standing up. His skill at getting off the bottom is so amazing, because I'll just tell you a funny story. Because he trained with Randy Couture and all those guys in Lindland at Team Quest, people would come up to him. This was what he told me. People would come up to him and say, gosh, you must have great takedowns. And he's like, what are you talking about? I'm getting taken down constantly. I don't have great takedowns. What I have is I'm great at getting off the bottom because I'm always on the bottom. Mm-hmm. And so, so you learn, so you prioritize it different. And then we add, at any time, someone can draw a training knife. So we have put training knives on guys. So you're in there and you roll. Maybe you sweep the guy, you get to the top, and here comes the knife. So you have to always be looking for someone to draw a knife, especially if you guys out there that are training jiu-jitsu. If you have to use it in a self-defense situation, if you take someone down and mount them, that's when they may flip out and pull their knife that you didn't know they had. Mm-hmm. So we just have to always be aware and just always expect a weapon. You always expect a weapon. So guess what? Guess how I came up with a different techniques and all that work very well under real pressure? Just put a training knife in a guy's hand and said, here, just try to hit me as hard as you can with that thing, and slash, thrust, just do your best. Do whatever you possibly can. And, it evolves over the years. Just evolves and evolves and evolves and evolves till we have something that works quite well.
I think you've just ruined my punchline, but I was once training at my jiu-jitsu club, and I had just come back from a Daniel Santos seminar. And one of the things I picked up was a little karambit, which is a curved Indonesian knife, which you hold in an ice pick grip, which has got a ring around your finger. So it's almost impossible to disarm, like virtually impossible without breaking the guy's finger off. And one guy in class was like, "Oh, you just went and did that Silat thing, eh? Show me a Silat counter to the triangle." And I'm like, "Oh, okay." So I go back to my bag and I hide this knife in my, this training knife, dull knife, in my gi, and I let him put the triangle on. He had a really good triangle. And while he's there, I take this knife out and I start, there's this femoral artery, there's this other femoral artery, there's in the armpit, there's in the throat, there's in the stomach, there. And there was just this look of dull shock for about 5 to 10 seconds. The guy had no idea what was going on. It's like, well, that would be a Silat person's most likely answer to being caught in a triangle choke, and not playing by the rules of the situation that got them into that triangle choke in the first place. So
exactly.
I don't think I made a convert that day, but I was amused, and that's the important thing.
That is amusing to me. But, again, that's the truth. And if somebody's not ready to go outside, we tend to think, it happens in if we're going to talk a little bit of like politically or whatever, people in our country that's developed with all these rules and it's, there's all these laws that people go by. They think everybody else in the rest of the world does that too. We should just tell them that we're sorry about this or that or whatever when they've been trying to kill each other for the last 5,000 years. It's like we're in this set of rules. Well, guess what? Somebody else might be playing totally outside that. Just a little sidelight. I think you'll find this interesting, and I think everybody listening will. There's a group of guys that went down. They were researchers, and they went to Indonesia and years and years ago, and they were looking for technique, and they were asking guys in these different villages about knife technique. They wanted to see, they were thinking knife disarm and how you take a knife away from somebody. And they asked this one guy, and he says, he thinks a little bit. He goes, I have a knife technique. Works every time. And they're like, wow, works every time? I said, well, what is it? He goes, well, what you do with the person, the other guy, you have to know what he likes, like a book. Maybe he likes a book. And so you get a book, and you go give him the book, and then you hide the knife, your other hand, underneath the book, and when he grabs it, you stab him. There's your knife technique.
Yeah, there's your cultural shift.
Yeah, totally different point of view on things.
Yeah. I don't actually, in my experience, it doesn't take that much. Like, it's not like you have to throw knives into every single jiu-jitsu training session to become sensitized to that. If you do that once every 10 times or get, train jiu-jitsu with getting punched in the head, I guess any time is better than no time. If you've done it a couple of times, it's like going to a tournament or one competition being worth 6 months of training. One sparring session that's completely outside the norm of what you're used to is also sometimes worth 6 months of training.
Yeah, exactly. I totally agree. Doesn't have to be all the time, but if you're thinking, we love jiu-jitsu, right? I just finished that, trained for 2 hours with these guys. It was just great. It's kind of fun. One guy is in his late 30s, the other guy is 19. Here I am in my 50s, and we just train and go at it for 2 hours and have that wonderful thing. But if you're thinking self-defense, if you think you would like to be able to use your jiu-jitsu for self-defense someday, it's very wise to every once in a while, throw a knife into the mix and see what happens there, or just so you're aware of what can actually happen for real.
The lawyer in me feels compelled to point out that throw a dull knife into there, please.
Boy, thank you very much. Put extremely safe. What we use is actually a small padded knife, so it's quite safe. And of course, the person wielding the knife is careful not to injure in any way his partner. So when I test things, I test it at very high intensity levels, but when we're training, it's at a lower intensity level. Because first thing to me is like, I'm training this stuff for self-defense so I wouldn't get hurt. How do you get hurt? Training self-defense. So safety first.
Well, Burton, if people do want to train self-defense with you without getting too badly hurt, what's the best way for them to get a hold of you?
I do have distance learning programs on DVD. I have some like, straight just stick fighting, just knife DVDs. I have the empty hand program as well, and I'm going to be coming out. I'm actually going to start shooting in a few months a BJJ for the street. It'll be a program specifically for street self-defense for BJJ, and I think it'll be very interesting for all you guys training jiu-jitsu because it'll show you how to tweak it every once in a while. So you have that as well, tweak the training, I should say. So you're like, okay, well, we're going to do this a little bit, and we're going to do that a little bit, and it's really, really interesting to me. Actually, the way you can set up, it's a lot easier to set up things when you can grab a guy's throat, like the old hip bump sweep when you have a guy in your guard and he sits back and you sit up and bump him over with your hip. Boy, it's sure easy to get those guys to sit back when you grab them by the throat first and start pushing.
Interesting.
So, it's kind of an interesting deal. But and I travel also. I do seminars, and so if you like, you can always contact me at jkdunlimited.com, or if you want a referral, just let me know. I'll put you in touch with someone in your area if I know somebody or whatever I can do to help. I just want to help everybody enjoy their training.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me today, and I really enjoyed this chat, and I think my listeners will also get a lot out of it. So thank you so much, and good luck with your training and teaching.
Well, thank you, Stephan, and I just really appreciate what you've done. You've really done a wonderful job getting top-level technique and training methods out to people, so thank you for that.